All right, we're live. Welcome to Noble Warrior. My name is CK Lin. This is where I interview conscious leaders about their journey to finding their second mountain of joy, prosperity, and purpose. My guest today has the highest distinction of trainer of trainers in spiritual technology, founded by Zivorad Slavinski. He has had over 30 years of experience helping people with their spiritual development. He is also the author of Spiritual Technology, A Journey into Oneself, Integra Protocol, How to Integrate Internal Conflicts, and Satori Protocol, How to Resolve Emotional Problems and Achieve Spiritual Enlightenment. Welcome to Noble Warrior, Vladimir Stojakovic.
Thank you, CK, for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. So, Vladimir, I really wanted to talk to you because I myself came from the scientific background, and I've been looking for methods to effectively and efficiently um, make progress to my own personal and spiritual development. And I'm very fortunate that my teacher, Satyan Raja, introduced me to Zivorad's work. And from that, I met you. So I want to ask you a first question. Start off with this, because for a lot of people, this is a concept they don't quite know yet. What is the difference between therapy and spiritual technology?
Well, there is an overlap, obviously,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and there are differences. So, with spiritual technology, we focus on releasing emotional problems. We don't focus on uh, curing mental illness and psychological disorders. And everybody has uh, everybody has emotional problems. Uh, let's say that according to, let's say, Australia, where I live, uh, every fifth person has some mental problems or some psychological disorder, uh, while everybody else has emotional problems. So you can say that spiritual technology is for everyone because you cannot really uh, uh, grow up, you cannot really develop without creating emotional problems. It's part of personality development. So what we do, we focus on emotional problems. We don't focus on mental issues and personality disorders. And the approach that we have is a little bit different. Okay, so I think there are over 500 registered official registered therapies, and they all have different approaches. Our approach is to make conscious and release suppressed thoughts and emotions. Uh, I would say that the therapies, official therapies, they work on moving the furniture around, so to speak. Uh, there is some internal world, and what they want to do, they want to arrange it in a better way. What we want to do, we want to completely clear, release problematic thoughts and emotions. So, our main principle, working principle, is spiritual, and it is making the unconscious conscious. So, in our methods, what we do, we use certain triggers. Those triggers will activate reactions. What reacts is suppressed thoughts and emotions. And then we feel those reactions, we verbalize them, and through that verbalization, we make them conscious. And by making them conscious, we release them. Okay, you can say that the problems arrive because we resist. Let's say something is happening to me and I feel some negative emotions, I have negative thoughts, And instead of just letting these negative thoughts and emotions manifest and go away, I block them. I don't want to feel them. I block them. I stop them. And because I do that, because I resist, they persist. Okay? And that's how we go through our lives, continuously resisting negative thoughts and emotions. And by continuously resisting, we keep building them up. And they go into the unconscious, they stay stored in our unconscious, the amount of them rises, and it is very reactive. So when something happens, when there is a trigger, these suppressed thoughts and emotions, they react and they create negative states and reactions. In our processes, we do it the other way around. What does that mean? It means we focus on a trigger, we intentionally, deliberately activate the negative reaction, but this time we are fully conscious, we don't resist it, we feel it as completely as possible. And then we find the words to express it. And that's the act of making the unconscious conscious. Once we don't resist it, feel it, and find the right words, we release this suppressed energy. And you could say that official therapies are more an approach, and spiritual technology is procedural. So we have procedural techniques that we apply, and that way I think we release emotional problems faster. So that would be one difference between official therapy and spiritual technology. We are procedural, and our main principle is making the unconscious conscious and releasing it that way.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I had a little bit of a camera problem, so I was adjusting it. Now I'm back. Yeah, one of the thing I really appreciate about this here is a personal practice. During the beginning of my personal practice and exploration, I went down the path of using rationality to, as you said, rearrange the furniture, trying to understand the source of my content, and then also treating them as something to conquer. And for me, that was a counterproductive experience, because as much as as we say, what we resist persist, right? So the more I try to conquer them, the stronger they get. So, and I also found that it was not that useful for me personally to try to understand why these content arise. And through the work of Zivorad, I just started to process them. Like, it doesn't matter why they come up, as long as I basically use the set of tools to process them. It was much more effective and efficient to disappear these quote unquote subjective problems.
Yeah, so let me comment on that. Two keywords here that you mentioned is trying to understand them, to find the cause by analysis, by intention, by focus. That's one thing, understanding the cause. And the other thing would be conquering them. Both approaches are inefficient. Okay, so you can think about the problem as an onion being very layered. A problem is very layered. Okay, let's say something happened when you were 5 years old, and that was the beginning of a problem. Okay, let's say you had a negative experience, and you came up with some decision, unconscious belief, which created the problem at the moment. For example, we can use an example. Maybe I was in the school, as a child, and maybe I was reciting a poem in front of the class, and maybe I got confused. The other children were laughing at me. I felt humiliated, and I came up with a decision that standing out leads to humiliation. Standing out leads to humiliation. So these decisions, beliefs, they are extremely important. That's how we form problems. That's how we form our personality. And based on that, we perceive the world, we perceive ourselves, and we behave. Okay? And beliefs and decisions are our truths about the world, our truths about aspects of life. And yes, we want to behave in accordance to our truths. That has roots in survival. Okay, so some scientists say, evolutionary psychologists, that our species survived because we have this ability to recognize patterns. So applied to our predecessor, that would mean something like, when you hear a lion, run the other way. Okay, that's a pattern. Okay, that leads to survival. And all patterns that we have in their root, they have survival. So when I come up with a pattern, with a decision, with a belief, standing out leads to humiliation, that's connected to survival, at least to the survival of my ego. Okay, and I want to live in accordance with that truth from now on. Basically, I come up with that decision to prevent the same outcome in the future, to avoid being humiliated in the future. And as I go through life, as I find myself in situations where I can be humiliated, or there is a possibility of me entering that situation, I keep thinking, I keep adding thoughts and emotions to that initial root, to that initial decision. And what started as a problem, which was probably single layered or very simple, it builds over time. And then 20 years later, you have a complicated structure. And the cause is deep. It's covered by many layers. Okay. And that's why it is not really possible. Well, it could be possible after hours and hours and hours and hours of therapy to actually become aware of that cause, of that initial decision, and to get some relief. Okay. But as you think and analyze, you actually add more charge.
That's right.
You add more thoughts. You add more.
That's
you actually
right.
increase it's counterproductive. Instead, we use a procedure. We use the shortest route to the cause. Okay, we trigger the problem. We find the first layer, make it conscious. That uncovers the next layer, make it conscious. That uncovers the next layer, and that's how we go, following the shortest route to the root cause. And once we make that conscious, that's how you resolve the problem. So analyzing is hard because the main cause is covered by layers of unconscious material.
Yeah.
And it's probably a little bit counterproductive. Another thing that you mentioned is conquering, like the willpower and everything, but you already actually answered to that as well. The more you resist, the more it persists. Resisting means adding more. So let's say I don't want to feel weak. Okay. So whenever I have any thought or emotion that I associate with feeling weak, I say no, and I suppress it. And what does that mean? I add it to the pile being the problem. And as I'm trying to conquer it, the pile grows, because every time a thought that comes up, which I label as, that's weakness, add it to the pile. Another emotion, that's weakness too, add it to the pile. So that pile becomes bigger and bigger. So analyzing doesn't help much. It probably adds more to the problem. and it's hard. Okay, it's hard to navigate the internal world, which is very layered, which is very complex, very full of conflicts. Okay, and conquering is probably even worse, because it simply means resist, and by resisting means when a thought comes up that you don't like, you add it to the pile and increase the problem. And we do it the other way around. Don't resist, make it conscious, release it.
Yeah. Excuse me. I need to cut that out in a moment. All right. So one of the things that for me was a profound shift in the way I relate to my content is this, because there's good, bad, I like this, I don't like this. And I will come up with a lot of different strategies, a lot of techniques as a way to strengthen myself or weaken the quote unquote opponent or the whatever it is I'm trying to avoid. And inevitably, I make that opponent or that thought, that polarity stronger. Again, what I resist persists, right? And but I also hear language that people use in personal development, spiritual development realms of, what they say, fuck the problem, right? That's a very strong language. And again, when operating from that paradigm, then you're now treating that as an enemy, and inevitably you also make that stronger. So what I do like is this particular approach treat quote unquote problems as neutral. It's not good or bad, it just is, right? You have a thought, you have feelings and emotions, you have body sensations, you have a situation. It's just neutral because it's based on context. That's good or bad. If you zoom all the way out, then there is, everything is neutral. So I really like that approach of just, hey, you have this content and you face it in with neutrality.
Well, we have the luxury of that approach. And I say the luxury, and that brings us back to your first question. What is the difference between therapy and this? That's another difference. Okay. Therapy is scientific based. In therapy, there is no consciousness. A consciousness is like something that exists, but they don't know where it's coming from. Is it the result of the chemical processes in the brain? They don't regard consciousness as an entity. So you could say that the whole philosophy approach has no foundation if you don't treat consciousness as something that is there, that is not just a part of brain activity. Okay, which is, if I am not this consciousness, then I'm something else, like a good person or bad person, which means I need to treat my content as something. Okay, ultimately, I am some of that content. In our approach, we are spiritual technology. We know that there is consciousness, which is separated from the brain and the body. And we don't just know that because we believe it. We know that because we have techniques that enable us to experience it. And that gives us the luxury of treating the content as just content. Okay, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter whether the content is good or bad, because you are not it. If the content is bad, angry person, frustration, yeah, you like the fact that you are not that. But if the content is good, happy person, happiness, you are not that either. So that gives us a very efficient approach, which means you don't evaluate anything that comes up. You just release it. And even more importantly, you don't evaluate yourself based on your content. Okay. So that is something else that differentiates us from the other techniques. The other from official therapy, because they do want to get you in a better state, which means with better content, with better identities. But it is impossible to have good content without the bad content. We live in a bipolar world. You cannot just, happiness means something only in relation to unhappiness. Freedom
That's
means
right.
something only in relation to its opposite. Okay.
That's right.
And that gives us a superior approach. We have the whole picture. Okay. While it's very difficult to create operational approaches if you are lacking foundation or if you don't have the whole picture. Okay. While here on the other side, we have whole picture. We know that we are consciousness, which is beyond polarities, which is neither good nor bad, which creates content. And that's what we want to achieve. To get rid of the created, unconscious structure and to remain as clear as possible.
So how is this different than, I want to go back to that question, how is this different than New Age? Because you, in your book, I actually really like the way you delineated, well, this is not New Age thinking either. So say a little bit more about how is this spiritual technology different than New Age approach?
Well, that would probably require to define New Age, which is extremely difficult. Okay, it's a cabbage of all sorts of beliefs, and the only condition is that those beliefs are not official religion, and they are not science. Okay, and that's I don't know how else to define New Age. Okay, but I can say something else. Spirituality exists for a very long time. Very long time. I think the oldest written records, if I remember correctly, are 8,000 years old. So if you look into yoga tradition, or if you look into Taoism, I think the oldest kept records are about 8,000 years old. So spirituality existed much, much before even science, let alone New Age. What we want to achieve in spirituality is what they call enlightenment, which is not really a great word. We want to achieve liberation. We want to achieve, we want to release all this content that we accumulated over our life or lives, if you want. So that's the goal. Okay. And another goal is releasing these emotional problems, but that's basically the same thing. Because what prevents us from being pure consciousness is these building blocks of emotional problems. That's what we want, a liberation. On the other hand, you have New Age with different goals. Okay. And very often, 99% of time, those goals are not spiritual liberation. And if they are not spiritual liberation, they are not spirituality. You can think about Zen. That's, for me, that's probably the purest spiritual discipline ever. Because there's nothing there to detract from, they took great care not to create anything that would detract from spiritual development. So that's very clear. That's very out of time. And I say out of time, I mean timeless. Okay, it is equally relevant today as thousands of years ago. So the difference is we don't believe in New Age. There's lots of crazy ideas. They are prone to believe in anything. Okay, but in our case, we only have two goals which are interconnected, to release as much charge as possible, which means spiritual progress, and to release these emotional problems. But these two are inseparable. They are the same thing, just looking from a little bit different point of view.
Mm. Actually, if you don't mind, drill into that a little bit more, because those two sounds the same to me. How are they different again?
Well, depends on the discipline you are thinking about. So if you think about Zen, which is pure essence of spirituality, there is no such thing as releasing emotional problems. Okay, they just focus on spiritual development.
Mm-hmm.
But in our case, we actually operationally use problems. What are problems? Problems are negative states and reactions, and they are triggered by internal and external triggers. And they can be both philosophical and very trivial, down to earth problems. Like, I feel angry when my neighbor makes noise. Okay, that's very earthly problem. But if I feel anger, yeah, that's a problem. Or when I think about the purpose of life, I feel depressed. Okay, that sounds like an abstract philosophical idea. In both cases, it's just an emotional reaction. And what reacted? Part of the ego. Okay. What prevents us from being who we are? Again, the ego. It doesn't prevent us from being who we are. It prevents us from perceiving who we are. Who we really are is always the same. It doesn't change, and it doesn't need any changes. But I cannot perceive it. Instead, I perceive some identity. So what we do, we use these methods to, when a problem comes up, we release the problem. And from the practical point of view, we immediately feel good. Okay, just 20 minutes ago, before I started the process, I felt pretty bad. I do the process now and I feel good. So that's like immediate benefit. But also, what I did, I pinpointed one building block of the ego and I threw it out. And now this ego is a little bit smaller than what it was before the process. That's how it is both spiritual and practical. So it is spiritual, yes, because I am removing these building blocks from the ego. But should we actually neglect the practical side? Look, for me, this is big. Things happen all the time. We get triggered all the time. And now we have this tool to actually release this negative state and feel good. Like, life is how you feel. If you feel bad, life is bad. If you feel good, life is good. Okay? So this ability, this tool to actually not suffer, to not have to go through suffering and just wait for it to pass. Because as soon as one suffering on one topic passes, something else happens and you suffer on another topic, and then something else happens and you suffer on another topic. Just imagine having tools that actually every time that happens, you can release. Okay, so yes, spiritual side is big, but practical side is also big. And you cannot do that, let's say, in Zen. Okay, these guys don't have, even though I endlessly appreciate Zen, even though Zen is one of the pillars of what I do in terms of some techniques that we use are built on Zen tradition. Zen is kind of included in it. Okay, so I have endless appreciation for it, but they don't have something that they can use and release the problem, the negative state, in 15, 20 minutes. So yes,
actually,
depending on the point of view, it's the same thing, but also, yeah, it is a little bit extra plus in what we do.
Yeah, actually, speaking about that, one of the things I really appreciate about this set of tools is the efficiency and the effectiveness. I'm going to keep saying those words because in my mind, I've tried a lot of different things. And so why don't you tell us a little bit more about how is it how are they different in terms of the spiritual technology approach versus, yoga or vipassana or Zen or all these other approaches. I'll see if I can paint a picture. This is how I've been explaining this to people who ask. So I've done Vipassana. I'm a big fan of Vipassana. It's a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And the main technique is to essentially watch, just be an objective observer, watch the contents bubble up, and then watch the content disappear over time. And to me, it's non-specific. And to me, it's
Absolutely, yeah.
also very slow, right? Whereas the spiritual technology approach, you don't just watch non-specifically, you actually drill in deeper and deeper in a very specific way. To me, it's the difference between a floodlight, right? If you imagine, the light of your attention is a floodlight versus a spotlight. So for me,
Yeah.
spotlight approach to me is very efficient, very effective. And I, as an engineer, I like it that way. Anyway, very long context. How would you explain the difference between how, let's say, Zen or yoga or, Vipassana or these other many different approaches to solve these subjective problems?
Well, from one point of view, people always look for difference. What is different? What is different? As if it's either or. As if it's either or. But how about this? How about we use your example? In spiritual technology, we don't teach you what to do before and after the process. So we don't have any dogma, we don't have any sets of beliefs, we don't have any advice what to think, what to feel, how to behave. We're only concerned with engineering, so to speak. So here is your procedure, do it, okay? So basically, we don't cover anything outside of the process. So is that good or bad? Well, it's probably good in a way that it doesn't impose anything, but it's also kind of bad because people would like to know, okay, I did the process. What I do outside of the process? To keep going with my development continuously, not just for the duration of the process. Okay. And if you go back to your example, in Vipassana, which I did and still do, as you said, you just meditate, you just observe, okay? And things pass. They appear, they dissolve. Sometimes they appear, they stay a long time, okay? The point of Vipassana is for you to realize in one moment, hey, but all of that is not me. All of that is just content and just a gap, and then a gap appears, okay? And then the more you can extend that gap, the more you can live in a me state, being fully aware that this is just content. You will stop feeding that content, and eventually, one day, maybe the whole thing just disappears. Maybe the whole structure of the ego just falls away. That's the idea of Vipassana, the way I understand it, okay? But it's a very lengthy process. Okay? It's a very lengthy process.
Is it 2 hours per day after the training?
Yeah,
it's 2 hours.
yeah,
I mean, for
I know.
me, I'm a
I know.
busy professional, so
I know.
I don't want to do 2 hours a day of meditation.
However, how about combined approach? How about combined approach? How about Vipassana and spiritual technology? That's what I do. It's fantastic. Okay. So with spiritual technology, look, if I'm to do 2 hours of Vipassana, and if I'm going to choose, am I going to do Vipassana 2 hours, or spiritual technology 2 hours? It's an easy choice. For me, 2 hours of spiritual technology is much more effective than 2 hours of Vipassana. Okay, because in 2 hours, I can do a number of processes. They last 10, 20 minutes. I pinpoint the problem. I trigger charge and I release it. And I feel good. Okay, I arrive into a spiritual state pretty quickly, pretty efficiently. Okay, but even better approach is to combine both, to do processes and to do Vipassana as well. not necessarily 2 hours per day. Okay, you don't really need that 2 hours per day if you combine it with spiritual technology. Okay, so what that will give you is a completely different understanding of yourself, spirituality. It will give you something to do outside of spiritual technology processes, and it may even give you the ability to be in the state of witnessing more and more, not just when you sit and meditate, but when you actually live your life. Because it's pretty easy to be a witness when you are not active. But it's kind of difficult when you stand up and start walking around doing things. Okay, that would be the challenge. If you can do that, that would be something really good. So the difference is, in Vipassana, you observe, but you don't really dissolve big chunks. Okay, and that's a lengthy process. In spiritual technology, you briefly, quickly dissolve big chunks. If you combine these two approaches, I guarantee it's going to be a very good result. In Vipassana, you get more and more. They just complement each other. Okay, the more you do spiritual technology, the more you recognize your real nature, the more, and then you do Vipassana and you are aware of your real nature, as opposed to passing content, as opposed to identities. They complement each other. And then during Vipassana, you recognize bits and pieces that you are going to work with when you do spiritual technology. Okay. And then you can do Vipassana as you walk in the park. Okay. Why do you have to sit down? So the difference, that's the difference. In spiritual technology, we identify big things and we release them quickly. But we don't have an approach outside of the process. Vipassana can help. In Vipassana, we don't release big chunks, but it gives us an approach that can be used in between our processes. And in my opinion, so see, that's the thing with spiritual technology. It's not opposed to anything. You can seamlessly insert it anywhere. Literally, in yoga, in Zen, even in religion. Like if you are practicing Christian, it doesn't. There's nothing here which will conflict with Christianity because we don't have any dogma.
That's right.
There is no set of beliefs. Exactly. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, one of the things I'm a secular person, and I'm not part of any kind of organized religion of any sort. And to me, the way, again, I'm an engineer, so the way I look at the world is through functionality, right? So all of these are, to me, just tools. What kind of tools do I need to use for a particular thing? Obviously, I have a hammer. Can I use hammer to, I don't know, cook some rice? Maybe, but probably not most optimal, right? So I just collect different tools so I can use in different situations. That's most appropriate. And I really like, spiritual technology is very secular. It doesn't have any agenda, doesn't have any dogma, and you can just put it into whatever situation that you want. It's about mastering the process, mastering the tool, so you can really master your own consciousness.
I agree with you. This is an engineering approach, and I am an IT person, and these methods, they are algorithms. They are sequences of steps that produce a result. And if you apply these sequences, no matter who you are, no matter what your beliefs are, you will produce a result. That's like algorithm. That's like engineering. It's a tool. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, not to belabor on the point of spiritual technology, set of tools, Vipassana. In my mind, how I'm using it personally is spiritual technology is very efficient and very effective at removing any kind of content, right? Any kind of charges, so that I experience the non-dual state pleroma as we know it, right? So that's, to me, I like that. Now, Vipassana, didn't really think to stack them together until you mentioned it. But in my mind, Vipassana is much more of a receptive state. You just watch. You know, whether you're doing moving meditation, you're
Absolutely.
sitting meditation, you just receive. There is no processing. You just watch. You know, whatever comes that comes.
Absolutely.
That's in my mind, it's the intentional approach versus the receptive approach. Is that an accurate reflection of what you said?
Okay, look, as you just watch, you notice. As you just watch, you notice. And what you notice in Vipassana, you can use in spiritual technology as something to be processed, okay? As something to be processed. Plus, the more you watch in Vipassana, the more you become aware of identities, problems, this, that, and the easier and quicker you recognize them in spiritual technology. So these two work
I see.
together perfectly. Okay, perfectly.
Hmm.
And you don't need 2 hours per day. 15 minutes per
Yeah.
day of Vipassana. 15 minutes per day. Look, I have so much experience with spiritual technology. I'm doing it like 30 and something years. And I process so many people. And when I have someone who does meditation or someone who was in therapy, let's say Gestalt or cognitive behavioral therapy, people like that are much easier to work with. Why? Because they are familiar with their internal world.
Hmm.
Why? Because they meditated. Okay, they didn't just watch television. So attention on the other outside. They also put attention on the inside through meditation, through therapy, and they became aware of their internal world, of its elements. And those elements are the subject of processing in spiritual technology. So once we start using spirit, things just pop up because they are already pretty aware of them. Yeah. So Vipassana, in spiritual technology, you have so much awareness, alertness, and observing throughout the process. Because you start the process, you use the trigger, something pops up. You have to be highly aware, highly alert to feel it, recognize it, make it conscious, and verbalize it. Okay, so these are the principles that we also use in Vipassana. And yes, so when you do this meditation, uh, be aware of the topics that come up that you can use in spiritual technology processes, okay? And also be aware of identities, uh, content, because they will come up in spiritual technology processes and you will already be familiar with them, and that will make it easier to actually do the process.
I want to bring a metaphor real quick because I think it would be helpful for me to contextualize the question I want to ask you. I do have a personal question I want to ask you.
Mhm.
So imagine you audience members, you are trying to discern the different hues, the different shades of a particular color. In the beginning, it looks kind of the same, right? Red's
Yep.
red or green's green or blue's blues. But after a while, you studying it, you start to notice the nuance. Like there is a slight difference between the two, but only after you look at it long enough, you have that facility, right? So in terms of content, our thoughts, feelings, emotions, body sensations, and mental images,
Mm,
all of these are content. The more we um, discern, the
yeah.
more we look at it, the more we have discernment of, oh, this is slightly different flavor of frustration, anger, joy, or whatever the content may be. That to me is a useful process just in terms of heightening our own self-awareness of what's actually going on inside our consciousness. Yeah. So
That's absolutely true. Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah.
so I have a specific question for me personally. So these days, thanks to all of the work that I've done, what used to be really noisy here now is noiseless or much less noisy. And when I'm doing spiritual technology or any kind of meditation, I actually have a hard time finding charges. So I wanted to hear your perspective. Either one, am I not looking at it hard enough? Am I just do I not see the nuance differences, or it is not enough effort, or I'm just a walking Buddha. I have no charges all the time.
Okay. Yeah, that question comes up from time to time, and it is a little bit, could be a complicated discussion. One point that I can ask is, are you in a comfort zone? Are you in a comfort zone? So, one of the great spiritual teachers said, comfort zone is an enemy of spiritual progress.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Well, because when it's comfort, there is no triggers. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You live in a safe place, safe at home, safe at work, no challenges, all routines established and familiar. Okay. So when that happens, it could feel that I don't have any problems.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's one question.
Mm-hmm.
The other question is this. Okay, let's not go to the other question yet. So how to handle the comfort zone? As Tony Robbins says, step up. I'm not saying that for
Raise your
you personally.
standards. Yeah, raise your standards.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, whatever your goal is, if your goal is to jog 1 kilometer every day, raise it to 3 kilometers. And almost immediately you will have a negative reaction. Okay. if you earn X amount of money, raise it to Y amount of money. And almost immediately there's going to be not almost immediately there will be a challenge. There will be something. Okay. So step up, raise your standards simply means increase your goals. Okay. Increase your goals, and that will keep you pretty efficiently outside of the comfort zone. And you know how the spiritual teacher I mentioned said that comfort zone is the enemy of spiritual development. In exactly the same sense, we can say that comfort zone is the enemy of progress, of success. Okay? Because once you reach your goals, you don't increase them. That's it. Okay, stagnation. But then you increase them, and then more progress. So that's one thing to think about. Another thing to think about is this. This is how I live my life. I am, and this is not something that I had to train myself to do. It's the result of me doing processes a long time. Okay, as I said, 30 and something years ago. I'm basically aware as soon as I have a negative reaction. Okay, let's say after this podcast, somebody tells something to me which is unpleasant. I get angry. Immediately, I know it's a mental note, it's full awareness. Hey, this is a topic to work on. This is a trigger. Okay. And that's how I go through life, noticing negative reactions. But when we say negative reactions, we don't mean just very bad negative reactions when I do something crazy. No, even subtle negative emotions are negative reactions to deal with. So unless you are really a Buddha, you just cannot say that you don't have problems. Okay. So when we say problems, we don't mean major things, although it includes major things like I'm dying of cancer, I just lost somebody. They are life crises. They are not emotional problems. They are much more. And yes, these methods are very applicable in those situations, and they're actually lifesavers in those situations. But when we say emotional problems, we mean even subtle negative thoughts and emotions, okay, which every human being has multiple times per day. Day. So when you're aware of that, it's kind of difficult to run out of topics. Okay, so be aware during the day about negative reactions. You're just watching news. Yeah, how many negative reactions do you have? Okay, just when watching the news. So that's another thing to think about. Here is something else. We live in a continuous mode of suppression, repression of ourselves. We continuously resist. How do I know that's true? Because we are not Buddhas. We are still human beings that have the ego. If I manage to enter an acceptance mode as opposed to resistance mode, in certain amount of time, difficult to say what time, 3 hours, 7 days, 3 months, 3 years, the ego would be dissolved. And I would not need any methods. I would not need vipassana. I would not need spiritual technology, anything. Okay, so that's why people say, acceptance is the key. Acceptance is the key. But we live in a different regime, in a different mode, which is suppression, resistance, continuously. Okay, so here is one thing to do. Sit down or lay down. I prefer laying down. Close your eyes and just ask yourself, what am I resisting now? And just be open. What am I resisting now? Because we are resisting something continuously. If we weren't in this resistance mode, in a certain amount of time, we would become Buddhas. That's just simply because we are not resisting the charge, suppressed thoughts and emotions are being triggered. We are not resisting them. They are being released. We are not saying, no, no, no. We are not resisting them. They are being released. And after a while, they would be fully released. So that's a practical thing to do. Lay down, sit down and think, what am I resisting now? And something will pop up. Yeah. And there is another thing. And there is just tell me this last thing. You can use that if you have, you can use that yourself. You can use that with your clients if you have clients. When they say, I don't know what problem can I work on, you can ask this question. What needs to happen for you to have the life that you want to have? So just close your eyes. You say to the client or yourself, what needs to happen for you to have the life that you want to have? Well, I need to have more friends. All right, here's a problem. Okay, I don't have enough friends. I need more free time. Here is another problem. Okay, so you can start the process. Okay, no free time. Close your eyes. How do you feel about not having enough free time? Oh, I feel frustrated. Something to work on. It's a magical question that it will, elicit problems that the client is not even aware of when you say, hey, what problems do you have right now? So what needs to happen for you to have the life that you want to have? And then things pop up and then you just work on that.
I appreciate you answering these questions. I mean, I was being obviously facetious as comparing myself to a walking Buddha. But
Yes.
those two questions, are actually very valid, right? As soon as you ask those questions, what am I resisting right now? What needs to happen in order for you to have the life that you want to have? Automatically, the brain goes to work, and
automatically,
then,
exactly.
Yes,
And look, you
things
didn't.
happen.
You're calling yourself saying a Buddha is not really. It's not really in any way wrong, because if I don't have any problems, I am a Buddha. That's it. But if I really don't have any problems, okay, because in this context, problems are the reactions of suppressed content. And being a Buddha simply means not having suppressed content, not having suppressed thoughts, emotions, identities. That's it. Okay. So sometimes jokingly, I say when clients say, well, I don't have any problems, I said, so you're a Buddha? Oh, no, I'm not. Well, then you must have problems. Then you must have problems. Yeah.
So, tactical question here, real quick. I have two questions, two follow-up questions. One is, do you process immediately, or do you batch them? You write them down and you do it in one session at the end of the day or middle of the day or something. What do you do?
For me personally, I process it as soon as I have an opportunity.
I see.
As soon as I have an opportunity, okay? Of course, if I'm somewhere where I cannot do it, then I try to be Vipassana mode. Observe, observe, meaning be fully aware of the reaction, let it manifest, but don't necessarily let it overtake you, okay? Try to act from, let's say, from the rational. If you are overtaken by a negative reaction, you can submit to that negative reaction and start fighting, okay? Or you can let it happen, but try not to be controlled by it, okay? And then when I have the first opportunity, I do the process. Because one of the privileges that we have with these methods, and it's a privilege, you don't have to suffer. You can use the first opportunity and release the problem, as opposed to just, look, I know people who, for example, had something bad happen to them. And I was looking at them, observing them, how they suffer for 2 weeks, for 6 months, how they start drinking, how they come up with all negative conclusions about life. And you know what they're doing? They are not just suffering at the moment. They are actually adding more problematic stuff, negative conclusions, negative decisions, negative beliefs based on those negative experiences. And then further in the future, it's going to be worse. So a person I knew had a breakup with his girlfriend many years ago. And then he went to the suffering stage of drinking and being very negative for like 6 months. And I have been watching them later for years, acting very badly towards women in his further relationship, all based on that one unfortunate breakup. So if he used the processes, first of all, he would suffer less during that time. He would release that. And more importantly, he wouldn't come up with crazy decisions, ideas, beliefs about women and relationships, which seriously poisoned a number of his future relationships. Yeah. So to go back to your question, I use the process as soon as I have an opportunity, and I make sure I use I use at least one process. I do at least one process every day, even when I feel good. When I feel good.
Yeah. So that's actually a personal practice of mine these days, is to, part of the way I think about it, how we go to the gym to exercise the muscles, right? We have more capacity for strength, stamina, all these things. You don't wait until you actually need to move to say, all right, I need to go to the gym for 6 hours before I need to move my house. No, you do it every day, every day, every day. So you cultivate this capacity. So similarly, in my opinion, this is the spiritual gym, right? We're cultivating our ability to remove content or transmute content very, very quickly. So to me, this is a worthy daily discipline, or blissdiscipline, right? Blissfully, doing these type of disciplines. Yeah.
Yes. Let me just add something to that metaphor, if it's a metaphor. So when you go to the gym and you practice, you feel better, and as long as you keep practicing, you have benefits. But there is another aspect here with spiritual technology. If you do it every day, you don't just feel better in the moment. You reduce the ego for one little building block with every process. So basically, you carry less weight. With every process that you do, you reduce that weight for a certain amount. And you accelerate your spiritual evolution, because that's what we are doing here on this planet. We are going towards full enlightenment, so to speak, even though that's not a good word. Okay. So somebody said that yoga is created just to accelerate what would happen anyway. So we are going towards some evolutionary goal, and that goal is to completely release suppressed thoughts and emotions, or samskaras, which are the impurities, the byproduct of evolving. Okay. And if you do process every day, you accelerate that. So basically, you are not just feeling better right now by doing the process, you are investing into the future. Because every
Mm-hmm.
day you remove a process, every next day you carry less weight and you
Mm-hmm.
accelerate your evolution. Yeah. So it's not just about now feeling better, even though, yes, you feel better now, it's about future investment.
Yep. I'm right there with you, my friend. So I actually do want to follow up with the question, the analogy you use about Tony Robbins. You know, Tony Robbins is all about raising your standards, right? So which I am a huge proponent of raising standards, mastery, development, hence this particular podcast.
Yeah.
But assume so I agree with you. And what I can hear already, some of the skeptics will say, well, wait a minute. I thought spirituality is all about, being in a perfect harmony with what is. So what do you mean, like raising your standards? Like it seems paradoxical, conflicting. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So spirituality is not against anything. Spirituality is against identifying with anything.
Mm,
Okay. So if you want to be a successful business person
hmm
because you want to boost your ego, that's the problem. Okay. Identifying, which means, aha, I will be wealthy and famous, which means I am worthy, I am special, I am superior. That's the
mm,
problem with achieving anything. Okay. But if you don't identify with anything that you do, it's not in conflict with spirituality.
mm, got it.
Okay. Now, it's not such a, so that's one thing to make. Now, just yesterday, I was listening a live discourse. I was here in Sydney. Eckhart Tolle was here
hmm
and he had his talk and I attended. And one of the things he said was this: nobody gets enlightened if they don't suffer.
mm,
Mm. Nobody gets, probably he didn't use the word for word like that, but that's the meaning, which means suffering is here to help us evolve. Okay.
mm.
So we go back to that comfort zone. If you're in your comfort zone, you don't suffer. It's uh, very difficult to make any spiritual progress.
I see. So
If
pause. So
Yeah,
what
yeah,
I just got now is, hey, if you're perfectly comfortable, that's fine. It's no problem, right? But if you want to grow, if you want to evolve, if you want to progress in if you have that
yeah.
intention, then push your edge in an
You know why?
objective, neutral kind of a
Yeah,
way. Is that what I'm hearing?
yeah. You know why? Because if you
Mm,
are in a routine state, charge doesn't get activated. If charge doesn't get activated, you don't suffer. If charge doesn't get activated, you don't get an opportunity to release it. Do you understand what I mean?
I do.
When do you
I do.
use when do you use spiritual? So we have lots of charge, but only one little part of it. And for the listeners, if they don't know what charge means, simply suppressed thoughts and emotions. So we have many of them. Most of them are passive. Most of them are passive. If they were active, all of them, we would end up in a mental hospital. Okay. So
Mm,
most of them are passive. A little bit of them is active. And that little part is what you process with our
mm,
processes. Okay. But if you live in a very comfortable state, nothing gets activated. You feel like you have no problems. There is nothing to process, nothing to overcome. Okay.
mhm.
So having goals, uh, activating charge, having goals is not a problem. The problem is always when we identify with things.
Mhm.
That's having experiences is not the problem. It's a problem if it's, oh, I am so superior, I am better than others, I am privileged. Having
Yeah,
identities which are false identities, that's the
mhm.
problem with spirituality. Not having thoughts and emotions. Okay.
I
So,
got you.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one case in point, not to belabor on this point, but for anyone who's listening, I want to make it as practical, as relatable to anyone listening, right? So recently I've been doing a lot of cycling class,
Mm-hmm.
and for me, it's just fun. And for me, I want to keep pushing my number of calories I burn during those hours. And it's just fun. Like there is no charge. Hey, today I did 550. Next week or next month I did 600. Like I feel joyful about it, but I don't identify like, hey, I'm in
Exactly.
600 or at 900. Like I'm so much better than those who are losers who are doing 300 or things like that.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
mhm.
So goals are not goals in itself. They are not a problem unless you identify. So I just mentioned Eckhart Tolle. So he was
Mhm.
here yesterday. There were like 6,000 people. Obviously, him flying around the world and giving these courses in front of many people, that's a goal, isn't it?
Mhm.
And being an enlightened person, does that mean that he shouldn't have any goals? No, not really. But he doesn't identify with it.
Mhm.
Okay. He is not looking for a sense of self in it. Obviously, you can see that when he
Mhm.
is talking uh, in front of the audience. Yeah, so that would be the difference. Okay. Having goals, and then we have functional goals. Okay, functional goals like I need a roof over my head, but that's not usually the status ego. When I want a mansion with 20 rooms, that's probably the status ego.
Yeah.
So there are functional, practical goals that we all need to fulfill, but they are usually easy to fulfill, like a roof over my head and enough food and paying bills. That's not very difficult. If we make it difficult when we increase those requests to a bigger house and a bigger house and a more expensive car and this and that, yeah.
So, okay, so on that note about Eckhart Tolle, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to ask that question anyway. Few different schools of thought. I love transformational content. I like content because for me, when I consume content, it brings up, aha, there's a nuanced understanding of something, or maybe a charge was brought up. So I like content. But there's another school of thought who says, hey, the answers you seek are already within you. You don't need any more content outside of you. You just need to seek inward to find whatever insights or epiphanies that you want. So,
Mm.
as a practitioner, as a teacher, as a obviously right now you just mentioned you went to Eckhart Tolle's talk. What's your position around consuming content?
So, can you just a little bit define more what you mean by consuming content? Is like reading spiritual books, watching
Yes,
spiritual
yes,
videos. That's
yes,
it. All right,
yes,
all
yes,
right.
yes, yes.
Again, you know how we talked about the relation between vipassana and spiritual technology, and how I pointed out they are not really in conflict.
Hmm.
Okay, there shouldn't be either or. The same
Yeah,
thing here. So let's
yeah.
go back to that school of thought that says uh, you are who you are already. You just need to uncover that.
Hmm.
It's 100% true.
Hmm.
It's 100% true. Okay. How do you know that? You probably read it in some content, if you understand what I mean. So,
Yes.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So if you use these both schools of thought in the right way. So look, when I listen to Eckhart Tolle, and I listened to him for 20 and something years, you know what happens? Because I have my practice. And I look, if you just listen to content, that's a problem. Okay. When I started, I was 19 years old. When I started, everybody starts by content. And we didn't call it content at that time. We called it books. Okay, content is not a word that I really understand. So I used to buy all available books by spiritual teachers and read and read. And you know what I was doing? Creating more content.
Hmm.
Okay, because I functioned from the point of view of the ego and how the ego functions. Aha, this is spirituality. And then you create new beliefs, new mental positions, more ego. Aha, that's spirituality. That's how I should be and do. More content, more mental positions. And when you begin your spiritual path, there is this incubation period of adaptation before you are ready to actually do something about it. and that's content. You're just adjusting to the idea that you should actually do something about it. And you do that by reading, absorbing, trying to adjust to all this, to absorb, and you create content. And then later, when I started practicing, I actually had to process away that content. It was a pile of junk, but I don't think there is a way. I don't think there is a way around that. Okay, I don't think so. In the beginning, you need to adjust to those ideas. You need to somehow change the perception of that you have, to include that in yourself. There's no way around that. But then again, as I said later, I literally had to process away all the junk that I accumulated in that first period. Okay. And then what happened? I found some balance. Okay. I would be doing my processes, which basically means it's just uncovering. In all processes that we do, it's just uncovering. We don't create anything. We just release, make the unconscious conscious, uncover. But on the other hand, as I was listening Eckhart or Osho or other spiritual teachers, sometimes when they say something, it's also uncovering in the way of, I had it somewhere here, not fully conscious. And when they said it, it popped up because it was ready, and I feel release. So if you just assume this attitude, you are what you are, you just need to uncover. The question is how you are going to uncover that. Okay. If you use methods, okay, no problem. But if you use methods and you combine that with listening, then that's the best approach, at least in my experience. I do methods every day, and I listen to these guys, and it's complementing each other. It's just listening to those guys, not good. That means you just keep adding. You're trying to be through the ego, to be enlightened. It's like saying to someone, be enlightened. You cannot be enlightened because you don't understand what that means. You understand it through the ego, which means you are trying to take a mental position. You are creating an identity to be enlightened. They're just adding more to the ego. So just listening to them, I don't think it helps much. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you do methodology that really works, like spiritual technology, and also listen to these guys, I think that's the best combo. That's the best combination. Better than just doing the processes.
Yeah, for sure. One metaphor that we use here on Noble Warrior a lot is it's kind of like walking, right? Your right foot is contemplation, consuming content, talking about it, thinking about it, writing about it. And the left foot is practice. In order to travel long distance, you need to use right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. That's how you walk, right? But if you just keep using the right foot, right foot, right foot, right foot, you're walking in circles. Or you keep taking action without thinking about it, you're walking in circles too. So in my mind, it's a feedback loop, the yin and the yang. Right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot.
The feedback loop is exactly the word I was looking for. When I do my practice and I listen, consume content, the right content, then this feedback loop is created, okay, which is, for me, the best combination. Better than just processes. Just processes is okay, but this is better. And just listening, just consuming content, I don't think that's even good, because you just keep adding content to the ego.
I have a PhD. I've read thousands of books. I was at the school of consuming thousands of books because I thought that would make me wise. And nope, it's just clogged up my mind with so much content. I had to, as you said, process them to find my own gem afterwards.
Yes, look, I don't think that was a waste of time in any way. Osho said, a person's steps on the spiritual path when the terror of the mind becomes unbearable. When the terror of the mind becomes unbearable, which means you have to go and develop your intellect as much as possible to reach a certain point where you can actually say, yeah, that's it. It didn't satisfy me. It doesn't work in terms of fulfillment. Okay. And then you look for something else. But at least the intellect is sharpened. And I think that's also important. I think most people who are actually seriously on the spiritual path did something before that to sharpen the intellect, to how to say that, inhabit that aspect of themselves fully.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And and then they can look beyond it. But at the same time, having a sharp intellect, I think it's quite important. Yeah.
Thank you for
And
that reminder.
the books that you talk about are engineering books which are not going to create too much content. They will create a knowledge, but not content. When I say content, I mean identification, suppressed thoughts and emotions, and so on.
That's a whole different rabbit hole I can talk to, but I want to.
Okay.
Anyways, but let me come back to this.
All right, let's not go there.
Yeah, exactly. So one thing that I'm actually impressed because I thought your book Spiritual Technologies is very well written. It's very, very well written. So
Thank you.
Congratulations for writing that book. In that book, you had said that you had written, you've done 4,000 aspectics. That was 10 years ago, probably. Now it's probably a lot more. So that made an impression for me because I'm nowhere near 4,000, right? So I'm curious, right, from the perspective of someone who's just started to someone who's done 4,000. I think you mentioned to me like 10,000 or 30,000 now, whatever the number. What is the journey? What's the difference? What's the palpable the difference, when you, after so many practices?
So that period that I was describing in that book happened actually 25 years ago,
Wow.
or something, even more. I think it was 1996 or something like that. And I did 30,000 processes in around 8 months, which means I was basically processing 8 to 16 hours per day. Okay. So let me just briefly give you some context. So going back to what Osho said, that a person steps on the spiritual path once the terror of the mind becomes unbearable. In other words, it's what Eckhart Tolle says. You start spirituality once suffering becomes unbearable. Once you suffered enough, okay? And something like that happened to me. I think I was never diagnosed, but I think that I had and maybe still have ADHD. Okay. So as a child, I was extremely physically active, lacking attention. And then when I went into puberty, the activity transformed from physical into mental, which means over a short period of time, I created huge amount of suppressed content, which resulted in suffering. So I was looking for something to help me. So I became interested in spirituality very quickly, and there were other reasons, but now probably it's not really relevant. So I was like 19 when I started, and I was looking for different things. Once I found Zivorad Slavinski and Intensive of Enlightenment or Enlightenment Intensive, I had this internal, clear recognition here. That's what I was looking for. Okay. So I went to short intensives, long intensives, and I think I was around 21 when I had this experience. I found myself as I woke up in the morning, literally outside of my ego. So for a very short period of time, I had full access in what it means to have no ego. Completely. Okay. And it was such a familiar state.
Mm-hmm.
It was me, just me, without any thoughts, emotions, or identities. Yet I was still able to fully think and feel. Okay. And then I went to 14-day intensive. 14-day intensive is a hard thing to do. So what happens is this: all of us have some kind of gatekeeper in ourselves. What is a gatekeeper? So we have a huge amount of suppressed thoughts and emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And this gatekeeper only allows to pass from unconscious to conscious the amount that we can currently handle. Okay, it's like a fuse. Okay, it's like a fuse for electric power. When electric power increases, the fuse jumps out, so problems don't happen. So we have this gatekeeper, and that gatekeeper doesn't allow more mental and emotional content to surface more than we can handle at the moment. Mm-hmm. And when you do Gnostic intensive that lasts 14 days, you keep bashing that gatekeeper. You keep destroying it. And the guy who initially created the first version of intensive, Charles Bernard, Illumination Intensive, he said something like this: people ask me, what will my light be after the long intensive? And I say, well, it may not necessarily be better, but it will be closer to the truth. And after this 14-day intensive, I understood what he meant, because I pretty much destroyed this gatekeeper. Even though my life was closer to the truth, I had stronger reactions. Okay, because the gatekeeper was pretty much destroyed. So I had quicker and stronger reactions, because the mechanism which was in place before to keep them under control is now gone. And I'm not in a good state, so to speak, because imagine being far more reactive than you really are, where these reactions are more frequent and stronger and quicker. And so just maybe one or 2 months after that, Zivorad Slavinski, my teacher, he released this method as tactics. And it was really
one of my favorite techniques.
Yeah, and it was a savior for me, because I was in that state. So this is what happened. First, I had this spiritual experience when I completely experienced the final reality as it is. So I was familiar with it. And then I had this post-intensive experience where I was very reactive. And I had this good method, which enabled me to deal with these reactions. Okay. So now I had this contrast. Look, I know what this end looks like. And I have my current state, which is not really good. And I had a feeling, look, if I use this good method, I can get close to this final state as much as possible. And that motivated me. So basically, without any discipline, I wasn't doing processes hours and hours per day because I was disciplined. It was like a pleasure. It was like an adventure. And I just couldn't stop. Okay. And that is the context. First of all, knowing what the goal is, feeling it like, oh, it can be achieved. And then having this current negative state caused by this intensive, and having a tool to maybe move from this current negative state closer to what I consider to be the end state. Most people don't know in spirituality where they're going. How does that end state look like? I know because I experienced it for a while. And then it happened 2 times after that, 2 more times after that as well. So yes, I have been doing these methods, processes, like 30,000 of them, and many things changed. Okay, many things changed. My perception about myself changed. My perception about the world changed. I was able to enter the state of oneness in non-active state, which means I just sit down, I lay down, and I go into that state like that. Okay, no problem. I still wasn't able to enter it in the state of when I'm active. Okay, because once you are active, when I'm active, which means I'm not sitting down or laying down, but I'm doing something. Okay, it took me some time to get there. But everything basically changed. When I say everything changed, it means everything in my perception changed. Nothing outside of me changed. Life remained the same. Other people remained the same. But I released so many of my negative reactions, and the ego became transparent. Okay, the ego became transparent. Yeah, before it wasn't transparent. It was like a black mass surrounding me. Now it was transparent. Yeah.
Okay. So if you can use like a martial art example, right? White belt, yellow belt, blue belt, purple belt, what black belt, like describe the different phases of this experience.
Okay. So see, when you think about phases, they depend on the methodology being used. Okay, for example, in Zen, I read somewhere the Zen masters differentiate, or Zen practitioners differentiate 17 different types of emptiness. Okay, because that's needed for their methodology and how they travel through on their path. In what I do, I only differentiate two types of emptiness. I call it fake emptiness and real emptiness. Fake emptiness is when the ego is empty, but it's still active. And there is this duality, me and ego, me and emptiness, not the same thing. Okay, not the same thing. Real emptiness is when we do the process, ego deactivates, it's still there, it deactivates, but I feel myself. Okay, so the point is, these states, I describe them in my book. These stages, I described them in a book. I don't think that I can even remember, but I'll try. So basically, the first one was you start from a crowd. You're a crowd of identities and content. Okay, and then I think the first state was I am emptiness, or I am. Oh, no. The first state was I am me. I think so. Okay, and that lasted as an identity for a while. Then I did processes, did many. Then the next one was I am emptiness. That lasted for a while. And then I realized, yeah, this emptiness is also content. So I removed that. So what you have at the end is presence. And now, when you don't think anything, you are there present. But if you think, who am I? Then the best thing, the closest thing is I am me. I am myself. But it's just a thought. Okay? The very moment you start thinking I am me, it's a thought. It's a thought. But if you release that thought, then again, it's you. It's you, just you, the same you know your whole life, being there, not being covered by identities and thoughts and emotions. But if you want to somehow verbalize it, then you say I am me, but not me as an identity, but me as a being which doesn't have any matter, energy, space, and time, but it's still you, the same you that you know yourself your whole life.
And you also, in the end, says just I am, basically, like presence. Is that what you mean?
Yes. So look, we just talked about Eckhart. So one of the things he said, not in this yesterday's talk, but generally, he said that the ultimate truth about you is not I am this or I am that, but I am. Okay, so what that basically means, it's not an identity. When you say I am this or I am that, it means I am body, I am consciousness, I am male, I am female, I am many things that I am. Whenever there is something added to I am, That's an identity. Okay, we are identified with it. So it's not I am this or that. It's I am. Okay, I am without an identity. Just, in other words, just me. What is the difference between enlightenment, I am, and everyday me? Well, everyday me is always I am something. I am body, I am consciousness. But the enlightenment is de-identified consciousness. Just I am. Or you can even say I am without I. Okay, I am without I. All right. There's this debate: is I the enlightenment or is it not enlightenment? I, as a thought, is not enlightenment. It's just a thought. Okay, but when there is no thought, there is your being. If you ask yourself, "Who am I?" You immediately feel I am. Okay, but if you think I am, then that's a thought. If you let go of that thought, what remains is the being without thinking I am.
Got it.
You
Thank you
know,
for that.
it's difficult to explain that, but it
Yeah,
can be
I mean,
experienced here.
I mean, we're trying to describe dynamic nothingness, right? How do you,
Yeah,
any words is content? Like, how do you describe nothingness with content? It's
you
it's
well,
a
well,
paradoxical.
yes, you cannot do that. As Lao Tzu said, he said, I think the Tao you can talk about is not Tao. Okay, because
Mhm.
when you say something about it, it's a concept. Every word is a concept, and then you perceive that concept, and then you create that concept, and then you experience the concept. You don't experience the thing itself. Okay,
Yep.
so yeah, it cannot be described, but it can be experienced through methodology. Yeah.
Yeah. I always thought that opening line was really funny. He said, "Dao ke dao fei chang dao." That's the Chinese version. The
Mm-hmm,
Dao that can
mm-hmm.
be said is not the Dao. And then he said
Yeah,
that, and he proceeded to describe.
exactly.
Wrote a whole
Again,
book about it.
well, yeah. Well, Eckhart said, like Lao Tzu said, the Tao you can talk about is not Tao, but now, once we said that, we can talk about it.
Yeah, I
So
see.
it's, so you know that these are just words pointing to that. So
Mhm.
once you know that, you have some pointers, but you don't take it literally.
Mhm. Got it. I appreciate that. Now, you had mentioned you were practicing the enlightenment intensive so intensely for 14 days, and you knock on the what do you call it? Gateway, the
Well, that's
guard,
how I
the
call it. The gateway. I don't know. I already
yeah,
forgot. But it's
yeah,
basically it's a mechanism that is there to only allow reactivity as much as you can handle.
yeah.
It's a self. It's a defense mechanism. One of the probably many
Mhm,
that we have. We know. When children have tantrums. Like a
mhm,
toddlers, they have tantrums, and that's because that mechanism is still not working properly. Okay, and then you start socializing them, and then they learn. And basically, an average human being has an internal guard against this reactivity. We continuously live having this guard against our reactivity. So when a reaction comes up, to actually suppress it, not to feel it
mhm.
fully. So yeah, the
Now,
gateway keeper. Yeah, the gateway
that's
keeper.
right.
I think that's
That's right.
yeah.
So, one of the things that we do talk about psychedelics on this podcast, I know you had told me in our earlier podcast you haven't had that experience, but I only want to allude into it to this specific point. These classic psychedelics, what they do, I guess psychologically, I guess you can call it that, is they turn down the default network, the guard,
Mm, mm,
right? That's guarding the control, so then we can
mm,
experience
mm.
new things. So it sounds like it's very similar. The way that you describe it is what I was wanting to point to.
Often I listen to the description of people who use psychedelics, and sometimes when they describe what they experience, it does sound like what we call enlightenment. It does sound. I cannot be 100% sure because I did not experience it. Uh, but yeah, it's okay. But there are easier ways to experience it, more certain ways to experience it. And another thing regarding our methods is this: it's not just important to experience enlightenment, it's also important what you release on your way to enlightenment. Okay, what you removed, how much you reduced the total sum of the weight that you carry, of the ego that you carry. So that's another aspect of these methods that we do. And yes, regarding psychedelics, I don't have any experience. I've been listening a few books, watching a few documentaries. Some people didn't say that, but some people do express it as a spiritual experience. And it does seem very often that it is a spiritual experience. Yeah. But did it release anything? Can you
Yeah.
repeat it? You know what I mean? Like with these
I do.
methods, you can repeat it 10 times a
I
day
do.
if you want.
I know exactly what you mean. So
Yeah.
I actually do have a nuanced question I want to ask you, because you actually alluded to it just now. So assuming just a visual metaphor, right? You're climbing this mountain towards enlightenment, quote unquote, at the summit,
Yeah.
right? In many ways, the daily practices of whether spiritual technology or yoga or whatever method that you choose, you're left foot, right foot, right foot, right foot, you're climbing this mountain, right? In
Yes.
some ways, I think the metaphor that I use is psychedelics essentially pick you up, helicopter, drop you off, and then pick you back up again, put you back on. So
Yeah.
so in some ways, for me, my personal experiences, it was very useful for me to see, like, oh, that's what it feels like to be, quote unquote, enlightened or connected to my true self. But also at the same time, my, I thought it was a silver bullet. I can just stay there, but it doesn't happen that way, right? You come back down really quickly. And
Yeah.
then, but it's useful, as we mentioned earlier, to stack them together. I do my regular practice. At the same time, if I'm stuck somewhere, then psychedelics, ayahuasca, whatever the thing may be, can help me break through those barriers that didn't have access to otherwise. That's my opinion
Yeah. Yeah.
today. I'm curious to know your thoughts about that.
Oh, okay. Okay. I can say this. You can also break through those barriers with our methods. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that from experience, because every now and then I hit something very big. I had in last 30 and something years, I had that a number of times. And you hit something, some entity, I don't know how you call it, because you do these methods and they are usually relatively fluent and easy to do. And then some bundle, ugly bundle comes up, which is hard to deal with. And you just keep knocking that wall using the methods. And after a while, it comes down. I remember, like, it doesn't happen often anymore. Now I can bring it down in one process, even that may be a longer process, not 20 minutes, maybe 1 hour. But before, like 10, 15 years ago, it would take me like 2 or 3 days to
Mm-hmm.
bring down something like that. I would do a process, I couldn't finish the process. I would go around doing my everyday life activities, keeping this thing in the back of my mind, and then
Mm.
going back later doing process again, stand up, do something else, keep it in the back, and 2 or 3 days later I hit something and it disappears.
Mm.
Okay, so yep, these big issues, big roadblocks, they come up. Okay, but you can break them down with these methods as well. Or if you use this approach that you mentioned, look, I don't have anything against it really. I never even
Mm-hmm.
tried it. How can I? How can I? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, in my opinion, you know what works the best for you and use that. How do you know
Yep.
that? From experience. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Use it. Combine it. I run seminars and people ask me, should I use this? Should I use that? They are even sometimes afraid that I will be jealous, that I will be angry if they use other methods. No. Okay, use everything that works for you. My whole life, I was a student of Zivorad, but he never had anything against me trying everything else. And I tried everything else. Okay. So, yeah, We don't have any
Uh,
dogma, religion, jealousy. Try everything, use everything, and if you have found an approach that works, use it. Yeah.
So here's someone who says who actually loves therapy, and this is one opinion, and I think it's similar, but I just want to double check with you. So his opinion is therapy, yes, it creates a lot of content, but it helps me basically try out different nooks and crannies of his mind,
Mm,
and
mm,
versus so, and then he liked that because he can now
mm,
look at for all the different nooks and crannies of his mind versus, let's say, aspectics. I took him through a aspectics process. He liked it a lot. He also had heroic dose of, let's say, a psilocybin experience. So
mm,
for him for him the work is going through the process, as difficult as the nooks and crannies may be. He
mm,
didn't really want to use psilocybin as a regular practice. He said he will only use psilocybin if he all these other methods stop working and
mm.
he's really stuck.
Yeah.
That's his
Yeah.
opinion. So I'm curious to know if that's essentially what you said, or is there some nuance that you wanted to say about his
Oh,
opinion?
well, look, I think he's right. I don't know much about psilocybin. I think I listened Jordan Peterson speaking how even one time using psilocybin can alter your brain permanently. I don't know whether that's true. Okay, but I am always for processes. Okay, uh, if I didn't have any need to use any of these, uh, well, I shouldn't, compare myself to other people. People are different. Uh, but yeah, using that would be probably the last resort. If he's using therapy to explore his mind and at the same time aspectics, that's great. But let's just point out, aspectics also explores your mind, if you understand what I mean. So yeah, these two approaches combined, they're good. And yeah, I wouldn't uh, see particularly any great need for using mushrooms or where psilocybin comes from. Yeah,
Now, a couple more questions, if you don't mind. You had
yep.
mentioned that you experienced, you were basically the control is down, so you were more reactive. Would you consider that dark night of the soul, or that's very different? That's not dark night of the soul.
No, not really. This is a very specific thing. You will have difficulties to find the person unless they are mentally ill who destroyed that self defense mechanism.
Hmm.
Okay, why you have to do something very specific to destroy it, and we did it. 14 days of agnostic intensive. That's something very specific. So no, it's not the dark night of the soul. People understand that in a different way. In my experience, I had something like that before I embarked to my spiritual path. It's basically when the world, the in which I lived in, when my perception of the world reaches its end. Okay, that means this is what I think the world is, and it doesn't work anymore, and you don't know what to do. Okay,
Hmm.
and basically that's when I switched to one completely materialistic point of view, which I had before I stepped on my spiritual path. I explored every part of that world, and I didn't found it very depressive. Okay, and then I stepped out of it and enter
Hmm.
a different paradigm, a spiritual paradigm, which is still a paradigm. Okay, it's like a working hypothesis before you actually achieve some result. But yeah, what happened to me at the end of the intensive, it's something that you will not encounter very often because people usually don't work to destroy that self-defense mechanism. Maybe it's broken with people who have mental issues, okay, but in healthy people, that works pretty good.
Do
And
you
I wouldn't
feel
call it.
that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Do you feel like with spiritual technology? Okay, so the reason I mentioned that because with psychedelics, you hear people talk about dark night of the soul a lot. right? It's a
Okay,
complete
okay, okay.
dissolution of their reality, and then it's very daunting for a lot of them. So I'm curious,
Yes.
with spiritual technology, do you encounter that as well, or no? It's a very safe, step-by-step process. You actually don't have the quote unquote downside of experiencing
Okay.
complete dissolution of reality.
First of all, what you just said, the solution of my reality is exactly what the word I was looking for when I was describing how I perceived the dark night of the soul, which is the dissolution of my materialistic view of the world.
Mm.
Now, let's go back to your question. Does that happen in spiritual technology?
Mm.
We treat that as just another problem.
Mm.
It doesn't
Okay.
really matter whether it's fear of heights or everything is pointless, okay,
Mm.
or nihilism. It doesn't really matter.
Mm.
That's the beauty of this approach. Any negative reaction is just a negative reaction. It's just a problem. It's just a construct of thoughts, emotions, identities. So if the dark night of the soul comes up with this methodology, yeah, you can dissolve it like dissolving any other problem. Yeah.
Mm.
And
Okay,
look,
that was
it,
easy.
it will it will come up. Yeah, it will come up. These
Mm.
feelings of everything being pointless and nihilistic. Yeah, it comes up. Yeah, it came up to me later 2 or 3 times. But you treat it as a problem. You don't confuse it for reality. Okay, you treat
Mm.
it's not reality. It is my content. Treat it as a problem. Work on it with these methods. That's the approach. Yeah.
Now, you invented Integra Protocol, is that right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it's
Integra
also this,
Protocol and
and the
Satori
and the
Protocol. Yeah.
Satori Protocol. Okay, great. So now that you have all these tools, obviously, you're the inventor of Integra and Satori. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference? Again, sets of tools, not one for everything.
Mm,
It's just different
yeah.
situations. So when to use what?
Well, which one do you want to hear first? Which one do you want to hear about
Whatever
first?
you want to. I mean, I want to hear them all: spiritual technology,
Okay. Yeah,
Integra, Satori Protocol. So what's
yeah.
in your
Okay.
mind is the similarity and differences, and when to use them, so forth.
All right. So look, in spiritual technology, we have a few groups of methods. One group, the biggest group, is the one developed to release emotional problems. Okay, that's like P, Perspectives, Integra. Then you have intensives. Okay, group intensive, Gnostic group intensive, and individual group intensive. That's made for you to experience enlightenment. So it doesn't resolve problems, but it brings you to enlightenment.
Mm.
And then you have the third one, which is called memento, to recall and release memories of past lives.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have these three. Those are Zivorad's methods. And then the biggest group, the one made to release problems like aspectics and Pete, they're good, they're great methods. But will they be suitable for every person? So I was doing Pete for years, and it has a certain approach. I call it a free flow approach. Feel X and inhale, exhale, and tell me what comes up. Okay, non-specific questions. It was suitable for some people. It wasn't suitable for some other people. That's why we need more methods more methods that deal with problems. Not because one of them is non-efficient, but because people are different. You cannot be a tradesman with just one tool, okay, with just one screwdriver. You need at least different sizes, okay. Yeah. And then the other thing is what they address within the human being. All of these methods, they try to disassemble a problem by targeting certain elements. Okay. For example, Pete integrates polarities.
Mm-hmm.
Identities are extremely important. So in one period of my life, I realized that I feel I have this need for more efficient work with identities. So I started experimenting how to do that better. Okay, there was a method that we used before. It was called Integral Excalibur by Zivorad, but it was created in the beginning of the 90s. And in the meantime, more room was created for more efficient work with identities. So to be able to more efficiently work with identities, I developed Integra Protocol. And with Integral Excalibur, you were able to integrate one stuck identity in one process. But with Integra Protocol, you were able to integrate quite a few, okay, like a group of identities in one process. So, and then I developed the standard method for Integra, and then the basic methods. Now here 3 methods, okay, which is basic method, standard method, and advanced method for different class of clients. Advanced is for the one who do the easiest class. Then there is the average one, that's the standard. And then those people who have difficulties doing these methods, we use the basic method for them. So basically everybody is covered. What do you get by Integra Protocol? If it's a general purpose method, the same like PEAT and Aspectics, what do you get by? Well, you get a different approach. So PEAT is more free flow, open questions, non-specific questions. Integra is more specific questions, like what is your need or intention? What is your belief or conclusion? So these are specific, they are guiding your attention narrowly to recognize certain parts of the unconscious content. So for some people, free flow is better. For some people, specific questions are better. And when I added this Integra Protocol to my practice, I was actually much more relaxed because I knew, okay, if the free flow doesn't work, specific questions will work. Okay, so the difference is not what they do, they both release problems, but how they do it. Okay, and also PEAT is focused into integrating polarities, while Integra is focused into integrating conflicted identities. So they target a little bit different elements, but all with the same purpose, to release problems. Okay, but approach is different. This is free flow. This is specific questions. So that's Integra. But my latest method, which I find to be special for me, is Satori Protocol. Okay, and I can briefly tell you the difference between Satori and other methods. So before, in order to experience enlightenment, you had to do either Gnostic intensive, group, or individual. Okay, and you couldn't do it on your own. Okay, so you would go into a group and participate in a group intensive, or you would work with someone who is experienced to guide you. Okay, but you couldn't do it on your own. You couldn't bring yourself into the state of enlightenment. With Satori Protocol, you can do exactly that. You can finish the seminar, and even without any previous experience, you can bring yourself into the state of enlightenment, temporary state of enlightenment, every day, multiple times per day, if that's what you want. Okay, so that's the first thing about Satori. Okay, you don't need the group, you don't even need another person. You can do it on your own. After you complete the seminar, you can actually apply it on yourself. And it doesn't matter if you don't have a day of experience before the seminar, or you haven't read one book before the seminar on spirituality, you can still do it. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is this. The second difference about Satori and other methods is this. Before we had these two approaches, you wanted enlightenment, you use Gnostic intensive, or you wanted a release of problems, you would use PEAT, Aspectics, Integra. So those two approaches were separated. But now with
last sentence, last sentence one more time.
Those two approaches were separated. Okay, you either use methods for enlightenment, but you don't release problems, or you use methods for problems, but you don't get enlightenment. And now with Satori, with methods 3 and 4, they are integrated into one approach. So basically, you start from a problem, you release the problem, but you end the process in the state of what we call enlightenment. So that's for me, that's a big thing. It integrates both enlightenment and release, and both spiritual and therapeutical. It integrates both everyday's life and spirituality. Because if you start from a problem, my neighbor is making me angry because he makes noise. That's very down to earth problem. You release that problem and you end up in the state of spiritual enlightenment. So that is integrating both completely. Yeah.
So I'm not very familiar with Satori, but I'm very familiar with Aspectics. So is spiritual enlightenment similar to Pleroma state, or are they distinct?
And no, not really. So
Okay.
pleroma states of emptiness and pleroma states, they are the last step before enlightenment. So all these other methods like PET, Integra, Aspectics, they would bring you into the state of emptiness, the last state before enlightenment. Enlightenment is just me. Enlightenment is I am. If you are into the state of pleroma, that's content. That's content. Okay. And there is just one more step to go in the state of I am. Okay. De-identified consciousness. Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. So in terms of nuance understanding of it, because again, I'm a practical guy, right? Engineering training. So I get that I want to alleviate myself from, subjective problems. Great. But I also, one of the reasons I like aspectics is this is a nuanced understanding. As we transcend our levels of thinking, you have new ideas. Like the content of which you fulfill the goal potentially are new ideas to solve the objective problems, right? So I was like, oh, that's really interesting. A good way to brainstorm ideas that way.
Yep.
I'm curious with Integra or Satori Protocol.
Yeah.
Does it also help you with,
Yes.
solving your
Yes.
objective problems too?
Yes, of course. You know why you have new ideas, because you prevented charge, which you released charge, which was blocking them. Okay, you were basically unconsciously rejecting those ideas based on some attitudes, mental stances, beliefs, which are unconscious, which are charged. Okay, so you can use any of these methods for that purpose. Let's say my goal is to write a book. Okay, or let's find another to start an IT company. Okay, let's say that's my goal. And then I'm thinking about my options. Many of these options, as they appear, I will dismiss or I will don't see at all because I have charge preventing me to do that. Okay, if I remove that charge, and it doesn't matter which method you can do it with Aspectics, Integra, PET, any of those, then I will be able to perceive those ideas, and then I will think, "Oh, now I get ideas." Well, I would get them before they were just prevented with mental clutter and emotional clutter. So you can do that with any of these methods.
I see. Got it. Okay. One last question, and this second to the last question, if you don't mind. That is this. All right. You during our pre-interview, you had said, "Hey, all these technologies are really effective in removing subjective problems. However, a lot of people still wouldn't take action, right? The goal achievement aspect of it." And I thought about it some more. I said, "Wait a minute, right? If this is so good at removing the charges, people should be able to take action without any problem at all." So can you help me reconcile those
Well, it's
two?
not that simple. Yeah, it's not that simple.
Okay.
Okay, let me give you this example. First of all, we live in a world which is complicated. It's full of triggers, full of triggers. Okay. And I am married and I have children and I have work and I have this and that. And I arrive to you as a therapist and I say, okay, I want to write a book and I want to work on that goal. So you tell me, okay, close your eyes. How do you think about writing a book? And I say, I feel resistance. And we remove my negative reactions about writing the book. And then I feel, oh, no negative reactions. I can just sit down and write. Okay. And then I go home. And then my wife calls and she said, oh, look, this happened, that happened. Can you please? A reaction is triggered. Then something else happened. A reaction is triggered. Then something. What happens is this, even though I don't have negative reactions and resistance to writing, I am continuously being triggered, feeling a sense of urgency to resolve this and to resolve that. And I keep delaying, even though I don't have any direct charge regarding writing. Okay, so that's one scenario why that happens. Okay, so when you do a process, it's not like you become possessed and all of a sudden something, and I start writing a book. I still have to consciously sit down, do it. So that's why I introduced something which is called Integra Protocol module, which has some basic life coaching things like determining actions, how to determine action, how to choose action, very importantly, how to set the deadline for the action. So if the action is small, if it doesn't activate charge, and if I have a deadline, no matter how busy my life is, because it's easy and because I know a deadline, I will find a way to do it. Okay, that's how I work around this problem. Okay, by defining small first step and defining a deadline. And because in the madness of everyday life, because the first step is small, it doesn't activate charge, and at the same time, I know the deadline, let's say tomorrow until 7, I have that in mind, and I'll find a way to do it. Okay, so that's one scenario. How come we don't have charge on certain topic, but we still don't do anything about it? Because we are being triggered by many other things. Maybe we don't have the sense of priorities very well clarified for ourselves. Yeah. And that's how it works. If I didn't have anything else to do but writing, I would probably do that. Yeah.
Got it. Vladimir, any last words you want to hear, you want to say to people before I give you my acknowledgement? Anything, if they can remember one thing, what do you want them to take away from?
Well, look, honestly, I would advise people to learn and do some of these methods. That's what I do. Okay. So yes, other than that, spiritual technology is not something that teaches you what to think, how to behave. I don't have any messages. I cannot advise you anything. I think that's even counterproductive. But yeah, have a look around, do a little research, and maybe you'll learn some of these methods. Try it on yourself, yeah, and change your life.
What website should they go if they want to learn more about you and the work that you do?
Okay, so my website is namesurname.com, which is quite complicated for people to navigate to. I don't have much content there, but there are books. Okay, there are books, and yeah, doing a little bit of research on Google as well, and YouTube may help. Yeah.
Vladimir, I really, really appreciate you being here on Noble Warrior. We cover a lot of ground in the time that we have. We talked about the difference between spirituality and therapy and New Age. We talked about, the different meditation techniques versus the very specific guided meditation technique that we use, and the possibility of integrating and stacking them together. We talked about, the different phases of your personal journey, right? And we talked about, what else did we talk about? We talked about a lot.
We talked about many things. Yeah. I'm even surprised how much we actually managed to squeeze in 2 hours. Yeah.
Yes.
Which is good,
I really personally just really acknowledge you for your sincerity and earnestness and the dedication you have to this work. Not only as a personal practitioner, you actually do the work yourself. 30,000 aspectics, right? 30 years, 3 books. It's obvious to anyone watching that this is something that you deeply believe in. This is your mission. This is, your gift to the world. But I really appreciate also just how you show up, as a teacher, as a guest, and when we were able to navigate this very, I shall say, esoteric, right? This hard to understand things with as much concreteness as we can. So I really, really thank you for your generosity, for being here, sharing your wisdom.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Beautiful. Complete broadcast.